great, let's dive right in. We're going to tackle one of the most mind-bending mysteries out there, something that really gets to the core of who we think we are. And we're pulling this from a really fascinating conversation in the ancient Srimad Bhagavatam, a text just packed with deep spiritual wisdom. So this is it. This is the central paradox we're going to unpack today. It was asked thousands of years ago by a disciple, Uddhava, to his teacher, Krishna. And it's a question we all kind of feel, right? Am I fundamentally free or am I fundamentally trapped? And how on earth could I be both at the exact same time? So let's just take a second to really feel the weight of this question. This isn't just some dusty old riddle. It gets right to the heart of the human condition. You know that feeling of having limitless potential one day and then feeling completely and utterly stuck the next? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. I just love how this is phrased. It shows you the heart of the whole thing. Uddhava isn't just asking some academic question to sound smart. He's genuinely confused, and in a way that I think a lot of us can relate to. He's basically saying, look, I've been told two things about myself that are complete opposites. How is that possible? And it's that honest confusion that really opens the door for this incredible explanation. Okay, so Krishna's answer, it starts in a place you might not expect. He doesn't immediately look inward. First, he looks outward, at the world we all experience and our non-stop search for happiness in it. He's basically suggesting that maybe, just maybe, this reality we're in isn't quite as solid as it seems. Now, what's so powerful here is this analogy of the dream. Think about it. When you're dreaming, everything feels real, right? The people, the places, the things you're chasing. But when you wake up, you realize none of it had any real substance. Well, Krishna's making a pretty bold claim here. Our waking life, driven by what our senses tell us, is a lot like that. It's fleeting, it's illusory, and ultimately, it's why we end up feeling frustrated so often. So, generally speaking, we all tend to chase happiness down two main paths. You've got your earthly pleasures on one side, career success, money, relationships, all the stuff we can enjoy right here and now. And then you've got the heavenly pleasures, the rewards you hope to get in the next life for being a good person in this one. They seem totally different, but Krishna's about to show us they have the exact same hidden flaw. And there it is. That's the punchline. Any happiness you try to squeeze out of the material world, whether it's here on Earth or in some paradise, is fundamentally unstable. You're always competing for it, you're always envious of what others have, you're always afraid of losing it, and in the end, it all falls apart. Nothing material lasts, so no happiness based on it can last either. I love this way of looking at it. Think of gaining entry to heaven like getting a cosmic VIP pass. You do a bunch of good deeds, and boom, you get access to the celestial club. You're living it up, enjoying all these divine pleasures. But here's the catch you didn't read in the fine print. That pass has an expiration date. Your good karma, your punya, is like a prepaid card. Once the balance hits zero, the party is over. And the text says you fall back down unwillingly. You're kicked out, right back where you started. So, if chasing happiness in this world, or even the next, is just a cosmic dead end, then what are we supposed to do? Well, Krishna says the whole problem, the entire thing, comes from one single massive mistake, a case of mistaken identity. We're confused about who we actually are. Okay, so before we go any further, let's just get really clear on this one concept, the soul, or the Atman. This isn't some fluffy, vague idea. In this teaching, it's very specific. It's your true self. It's the pure consciousness that's aware of everything. It's the silent witness that's totally separate from the physical body and the chattering mind it's using. This is probably one of the most brilliant analogies in the whole text. I mean, think about it. Fire and a log of wood. The fire is in the wood. It makes the wood seem alive, but it is not the wood. They are two totally different things. The fire is what gives heat and light. The wood is just the fuel. In the exact same way, the soul is the spark of life and consciousness in the body, but it's not the body. It's the one lighting everything up, not the thing being lit. And here it is. This is the crucial mistake. This is where it all goes wrong. Bondage, that feeling of being trapped, happens the second the fire starts thinking it is the wood. It's when we, the conscious soul, believe that the temporary qualities of our body and mind, our age, our job, our thoughts, our feelings, are who we really are. That single mistake, right there, is the root of all our suffering. But you gotta wonder, right? If it's just a simple mistake, why is it so convincing? Why is this illusion so incredibly powerful? Well, Krishna explains there are these unseen forces at play, like cosmic puppeteers pulling the strings of our reality. They're known as the modes of material nature, or the gunas. So what are these gunas? Think of them like the universe's basic operating system. They're these fundamental energies that mix and match in different combinations to create everything we see and feel, every object, every action, every mood. We can't see them directly, but we are feeling their effects every single second. Now, check out how this chain reaction works. It's so logical, it's almost scary. First, the gunas create this world that looks like it's full of a million separate things. That sense of otherness makes us feel like we're lacking something, which creates a dependency on other people and things to make us happy. That dependency, that is bondage. And of course, as long as you're dependent on things outside your control, you're going to live in a state of fear. See how it works? It's a perfect, self-sustaining loop. Okay, so that sounds pretty bleak, I know. Our world is like a dream, and we're trapped in a case of mistaken identity that's run by these invisible forces. But here's the good news. Krishna now reveals the way out. And it's not some complicated ritual or a prayer. It's a path of deep self-inquiry. The solution is knowledge. And we're not talking about just memorizing facts from a book. This is a deep, direct, transformative understanding that literally burns away the fog of ignorance. That's why it's called the fire of knowledge. And what's the fuel for this fire? Sincere, passionate inquiry, a burning desire to know the truth of who you really are. This is jignasa. And this is just such a cool way to visualize how that fire gets lit. The teacher is like the bottom piece of wood you'd use to start a fire. The student is the top piece. And the teachings, the back and forth, the questions and answers, that's the friction between them. When you get all three of those things working together with real effort, a spark ignites. And that spark becomes a fire of knowledge so powerful, it can burn the entire illusion of bondage to ashes. So, with all of that under our belts, we can finally come full circle. We can go all the way back to Uddhava's original question and solve this paradox. How can we be both totally free and totally bound at the exact same time? And here's the answer, plain and simple. In its true nature, the soul is always free. It's just like how fire is always, by its nature, hot and bright. That freedom is your permanent, unchangeable reality. However, because of ignorance, because the fire has forgotten itself and thinks it's the wood, it appears to be bound. The bondage was never real. It was a perception. It was a mistake. So you are eternally free, but just temporarily confused. And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this whole thing. This is so important. You don't have to work to become free. You don't have to earn it or achieve it someday in the future. Liberation isn't something you acquire. It is something you realize. It's about waking up from the dream and simply remembering who you've been this entire time. It's a journey of rediscovery, not a journey of creation. And so that really just leaves us with one final question, a personal one. That fire of knowledge, remember, is fueled by inquiry. So when you look at your own life, at the story you tell yourself about who you are, at all the things you're chasing to be happy, what illusions are you ready to start seeing through?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We've got a really profound and I think quite challenging set of sources today. These are excerpts from a philosophical text that, well, it doesn't just give life advice. It cuts right to the core, Existence, duty, freedom. Our mission really is to get a handle on why we act the way we do, what our actions actually achieve, and maybe how to navigate this constant pull between our eternal nature and our temporary reality.
That's a great summary. This material, it's very structured, it builds logically. It starts with the practical stuff, how someone serious should conduct themselves day to day. And then it moves into the deep metaphysical questions, the nature of the self, the cosmos. Our goal here is to kind of synthesize the essence for you, what's the right way to act. And maybe more importantly, why do our actions, even the best ones, often just lead to, well, cycles of frustration?
Yeah, what jumps out right away is that you can't just define good action by external stuff. Shloka 1 lays down this core idea. Sure, you perform your prescribed duties, your svadharmaya. You follow the social and spiritual orders, the Varnashrama Kulakaram. That's necessary. But the text insists, like right off the bat, that that's not enough on its own, not even close.
That's the absolute pivot point. The external action, the duty itself, needs transforming internally. Two things are required. First, you have to take shelter of the Supreme Lord, Madashya. Recognize something higher than just personal gain. And second, crucially, the soul has to operate as akama atma.
Akama atma, acting without selfish desires.
Exactly. If you're attentive, avahita, to your duty, but you're driven by selfish desire, you fundamentally miss the point.
Okay, let's dig into akama atma right now, because for a lot of people, free from selfish desires sounds passive, like apathy maybe, or just inaction. But the text is simultaneously saying, do your duty. So what does desireless action actually look like? Are you supposed to just stop caring about results?
That's the common misunderstanding, isn't it? Akama atma isn't apathy at all. It's the opposite of kama, which is that grasping, selfish desire for immediate gratification or keeping things forever. Desireless action means acting with the understanding that the results, they don't ultimately belong to you. They belong to the larger system or the divine, perhaps. Think about a master carpenter. They're completely absorbed in perfecting their craft.
Okay.
Their drive comes from the quality of the work itself, right? Not just the paycheck or the fame or winning some award. They act with skill, dakan, with dedication, with intention. But internally, they're free from that clinging to the outcome. It's like acting as a steward rather than an owner.
Ah, I see. So it's shifting the focus away from the outcome, which is always temporary, towards the process, the quality of the action itself. That sets things up nicely for the next part, which really drills down into what this disciplined seeker needs to be like.
Okay, let's unpack this foundation. Duty, discipline. The sources are really specific here. No guesswork allowed. It gives like practical instructions for anyone serious about liberation. Yes, this is the baseline conduct. The screening process, you could almost say. It draws a really clear line between actions that bind us further and actions that start to free us. Shloka 4 presents this clear fork in the road. On one path, you have nivatam karma.
Newfound karma.
These are duties done for the sake of renunciation, aimed at spiritual understanding. These are the actions one should be doing.
Okay. And the other path?
That's pratam karma. Materialistic actions, fruitive actions, the ones motivated by wanting material rewards, wealth, fame, status, even pleasure in heaven. For the truly dedicated seeker, the mat part, these kinds of actions, they have to be given up entirely because chasing temporary gain is just fundamentally at odds with the goal of eternal freedom.
What's really interesting, though, is this shortcut of inquiry the text mentions. It says if someone is completely absorbed in seeking the absolute truth, if they're fully jiñasaya samprovito, they should actually disregard the karma kodanam, which is like the whole body of rules about rituals for rewards, right? That seems huge.
Oh, it's massive. It's a fundamental statement. It elevates internal realization above external ritual. If your inner focus, your inquiry, your jijasa is that intense and sincere, then the whole complicated system of sacrifices and fasts designed to earn you points for heaven, it becomes unnecessary, obsolete. Why? Because you've moved beyond needing temporary results. The text is basically saying if you genuinely want the truth, don't get sidetracked bargaining for better temporary conditions. Go straight for the source.
I get it. Okay. That makes the preparation phase even more critical then. Shloka 5 outlines the specifics, starting with practicing yaman rules of restraint, like nonviolence, truthfulness, and sometimes nyaman, positive rules like cleanliness or study, basic ethical ground rules.
They're the absolute foundation. But the most crucial relationship described here is with the teacher, the guru. The seeker must serve a spiritual master, a gurum, who has 3 specific non-negotiable qualities. The guru must be peaceful, shantam. They have to know the Supreme Lord, Madhavijam, and they must be fully absorbed in the Supreme Lord, Madhatmakam. It's not enough for the teacher to be just an academic or someone who knows the rituals. They have to embody that realization. Madhatmakam, absorbed in the divine. That's essential for guiding the student properly.
And the student's character has to mirror that sincerity.
Right.
Shloka 6 gives us this psychological profile of the ideal student. It demands serious humility, being a manya, not demanding honor, being free from envy, matsara, and possessiveness, nirmama. But it also requires practical skills. Be skillful, dakam, but not hasty, asatra. It's an interesting blend, that spiritual depth and practical competence.
Well, the practical competence is needed to navigate the world effectively without getting completely sidetracked by it. Everything about the seeker's character is designed to support that genuine inquiry. They need to be artha jinnasu, truly inquisitive about the real meaning, the truth. And their speech, amagavak, only speaking meaningful words. It's like they're filtering their whole life through the lens of spiritual progress.
Which filters us right into maybe the toughest requirement here, this radical indifference mentioned in Shloka 7. The seeker has to be indifferent, udasni, towards all material relationships and possessions, Wife, kids, home, land, relatives, money, everything.
Right. This is a point that often gets misunderstood, and it's worth pushing on. The text says udasana, indifferent.
Okay, I have to push back here. Doesn't that kind of thinking just lead to neglect? Am I supposed to literally walk away from my family or tank my career just to be indifferent? That sounds, well, it sounds irresponsible, not detached.
It's a crucial question, absolutely. And the emphasis is on psychological detachment, not necessarily physical abandonment. The instruction is to treat all these things equally, seeing them as related only to the temporary self, sarv artham evapmana. So the relationship with your spouse gets equalized in importance with your relationship to your land or your bank account. They're all temporary circumstances the soul is experiencing, but they are not the soul's identity. They aren't permanent possessions.
So it's about breaking down the hierarchy we naturally place on things. Like we value family immensely, feel devastated by losing money. But the text says, treat the loss of land and the loss of a relative with the same inner calm, because both are just temporary situations for the embodied self.
Exactly that. This radical equalization is what liberates the mind. If you are truly udasana, you perform your duties towards your family, your work, perfectly, but you do it without that paralyzing fear of loss. Because you understand deep down that these connections are related only to your temporary embodiment. This internal psychological detachment is really the prerequisite for the next step, understanding the illusion itself. You can't grasp your true self if you're desperately clinging to its temporary coverings.
That makes perfect sense as a transition. We've got the discipline to conduct down. Now we get into the why, the metaphysics, understanding why that detachment is so necessary. Because of the illusion, the futility that governs so much of material life.
Precisely. Shloka 2 tells the pure-hearted soul, the Vishuddhatma, to just observe those beings who are devoted to sense gratification, the Vyatmamanam. And what do they see? They see that the efforts of these people, focused on the senses, inevitably end in sarvaram viparam.
That's such a strong phrase, sarvaram viparam, the complete reversal and frustration of everything they try to achieve. Can you give us like a modern-day example of that?
Oh, sure. Think about the relentless pursuit of status, maybe in the courtish world. Someone dedicates, say, 20 years, sacrificing health, relationships, everything, to climb the ladder. They finally reach the top CEO, max salary, power, the works, and the moment they get there, they're miserable. They realize the stress of maintaining that status is crushing. They face constant rivalry, spardha. They live in perpetual fear of losing it all. The very goal they invested their entire life in achieving reverses on them. It becomes the source of their deepest suffering. Why? Because they mistakenly accepted that sense object status, wealth, as the ultimate reality. And that mistaken identity fuels the frustration.
Wow. That hits close to home for many, I bet. It's this illusion of duality that traps us then, chasing something out there. Shloka 3 uses these great analogies for how useless this chase is. Our dualistic mindset, padatma, which comes from the modes of nature, the gunas, is described as being as futile, vifala, as the perceptions of someone dreaming, or the mental daydreams, manoratha, of someone meditating.
Yes, the core issue is accepting nanatmakatva, the belief in manifoldness. The belief that this diverse material world is solid, real, permanent. Dream analogies work so well because in a dream, you experience intense reality, right? Fear, joy, struggle. But the second you wake up, poof, you realize it was entirely dependent on a temporary mental state. Similarly, our waking experience of duality is dependent on these modes of nature. As long as we buy into this duality, we're lost in illusions that only seem substantial while we're asleep to the underlying truth.
So to wake up, we have to grasp that fundamental split between the self and the body, which brings us to that powerful analogy in Shloka 8.
This is one of the most critical analogies for getting this conceptually. The self, atmiketa, is vilakanta, completely distinct from both the gross body, stula, and the subtle body, supant. And the comparison is to fire, agnya, within wood, darum.
Okay, walk us through that. How exactly does fire show the self's distinct nature?
Think about it. The wood is the fuel, representing the body, both the physical part and the subtle part, like mind and intelligence. When fire enters the wood, it seems to take on the wood's characteristics, doesn't it? A tall flame from a tall stick. But the fire itself is the dahaka, the agent that does the burning. And it's the prakashka, the agent that illuminates. The fire isn't made by the wood. It's not destroyed when the wood turns to ash. It just uses the wood as a temporary medium to manifest itself. In the same way, the eternal self uses the temporary body, But the self remains this separate, eternal consciousness, the witness, completely distinct from the material covering it animates for a while.
That's a crucial distinction. And it applies not just to us, the individual souls, but also to the Supreme Self, right?
Yeah.
As Shloka 9 points out.
Exactly. The Supreme Self, Pa, enters the cosmic creation and seems to take on material qualities. Manifesting creation, destruction, appearing tiny or vast, Pa, showing all this diversity, Nanatham. But throughout it all, he remains transcendental, totally untouched by those qualities. He's managing. He's the ultimate witness, the ultimate regulator, letting the show run without getting caught up in it.
Which loops us back perfectly to the definition of bondage in Shloka 10. Sasara, this cycle of material existence, happens when the living entity forgets that firewood difference. When it identifies with the body, diha, created by the modes.
The absolute key word there is identification. Bondage isn't literal chains. It's accepting a temporary external covering as our true, eternal, internal identity. A wise person has to use knowledge to slice through that mistaken identity.
Okay, so if identification is how we get bound, how do we get free? What's the actual mechanism for liberation?
It's through persistent inquiry, Jinasya. Shloka 11 is clear. Liberation demands deep, relentless inquiry to realize the soul, self-situated, pure, kevalam, supreme, param. And once you start to realize that, you have to gradually, yatarkramam, reject, nirasad, the material idea of reality, vastu buddham. It's like an unlearning process. Systematically taking apart every false assumption you hold about the reality of matter.
In this unlearning process, it's helped along by the teacher-student relationship using that amazing analogy of the fire sticks, the Aden, in Shloka 12.
The fire sticks analogy. It's brilliant because it shows this realization isn't passive. It requires effort, friction, collaboration. The spiritual master, the Akarya, is the lower stick, the Adavanya. The disciple, Antavasi, is the upper stick with the Ranya. And they have to be brought together purposefully. And the instruction, the Pravakana, is the friction, the connection, Tatsantanam, between them.
So the teaching isn't just listening passively to a lecture. It's the active rubbing together doubt meeting clarity, effort meeting guidance that actually generates the spark.
Precisely. That friction, that dynamic exchange creates the vidyasanhi, the connection or spark of knowledge. And that spark is sukavaha. It brings transcendental happiness. It's a shared journey, needing both the teacher's wisdom and the student's sincere effort.
And that fire of knowledge that gets sparked, that becomes the ultimate purifier. Shloka 13 says this perfect, super pure intelligence, ativishuddha buddhi, drives away the illusion, mayam, that's born from the modes. It's not a temporary fix. It's like it burns it all away.
It doesn't just repel the illusion. It actually burns up the modes themselves, gusas and daihya. And by doing that, it reveals the pure soul underneath. The process is fascinating. It's self-consuming and then self-pacifying. The analogy closes perfectly. Just like fire burns up its fuel, asimid, and then with nothing left to burn, it becomes calm, Shrimati. This pure intelligence, after burning away all the ignorance, it also becomes calm, pacified, leaving just the pure, realized soul. Hashtag 4. The fatal flaw of fruit of action.
Wow. Okay, so that realization of the self and how liberation actually works, that gives us the lens to evaluate everything else, doesn't it? Now we dig into the real cost of chasing material rewards, whether it's simple stuff on earth or even like the grandeur of heavenly life. And this is where I think it gets really stark. The sources are just ruthless about the flaw built into even the most pious, successful actions.
Uncompromising is the word. The fundamental flaw is that material happiness, whether it's stuff we experience right here, drive at, or things we only hear about, like celestial pleasures, shrutam is inherently dunem, corrupt. That's from Shloka 21.
Corrupt. That's a strong word for happiness. What makes even successful enjoyment corrupt?
Well, the text points to 3 unavoidable taints in the material realm. First, rivalry, sparta. Material happiness, here or in heaven, is almost always defined by comparing yourself to others, who has more. Second, envy, asuya. If you get something good, others envy you. If they get something, you envy them. It's baked in. And third, the absolute guarantee of decline and destruction, achaya and vyaya. Nothing you gain materially lasts forever. It's fundamentally unstable.
You can see that instability perfectly in the farming analogy in the same verse, right? These materialistic pursuits are ultimately fruitless, nafulam, like farming, givalet, which is always threatened by so many problems, bhavantaraya kamatva, drought, pests, frost, you name it. You pour in massive effort, things might look good for a while, but the outcome is always shaky and guaranteed to end eventually.
Exactly. Now, let's consider the absolute best case scenario for this kind of action. the peak achievement. What happens if someone performs their Vedic duties, their dharma, perfectly without any hindrance, avihata? According to Shlokas 22-23, this performer of sacrifice, the yajika, gets to Svarloka, the heavenly planets. They enjoyed divine pleasures, divyan bhogan, just like a demigod, devavat.
And the description of that heaven in Shloka 24, it's incredible. Maximum material fulfillment, flying around in a fancy airplane, vimani, earned by your good deeds. Praised by celestial singers, gandharvas, wearing amazing clothes. Haujavehug, hanging out with celestial beauties. It sounds like ultimate success. The biggest reward for doing good.
And this is where the profound, almost cruel, dramatic irony kicks in. This is the absolute core of the argument against this path. Shloka 25 describes this person enjoying themselves to the max, sporting with celestial women, surrounded by beauty and pleasure. They are nirvata, completely satisfied at the peak of divine enjoyment, and right there, in that moment of perfect, blissful satisfaction, hina vedapnapata. He is utterly, completely unaware of his own impending catastrophic fall.
Oh, wow. That's the fatal flaw, isn't it?
Yeah.
The highest point is also the point closest to the edge. He's blinded by his own success.
Precisely. The text makes it crystal clear that enjoyment only lasts as long as the accumulated pious credit, the pusham, holds out. Piety is like money in the bank. It's finite. Once that pusham is used up, kalapusha, and the person falls. Patadi arvag, they fall downwards, unwillingly, anachan, pushed by time, kalakalita. That's Shloka 26. That's the inevitable fate of even the greatest material success. It comes with a built-in tragic expiration date, enforced relentlessly by time and karma.
So success just guarantees a future failure, maybe from a higher starting point, but failure nonetheless. Now, just quickly touching on the flip side, Shlokas 27 and 28 describe the downward spiral through adharma, irreligion, association with bad people, uncontrolled senses, lust, greed, violence, bhuta-vihasaka.
Right. Actions rooted in irreligion, things like unlawful animal killing, pashin abhihinalabhya, worshipping ghosts and nasty spirits, pita bhutaganya jajan, they lead the person to be dragged helplessly down to the hells, narakan. Cast into dreadful darkness, ulbatama. The suffering there is described as intense and long.
And ultimately, whether you go up to heaven or down to hell, the long-term result is functionally the same, isn't it? According to Shloka 29, actions that end in misery, duadarkat, just guarantee you get another body. Start the cycle over. The text basically asks the listener point blank, what real happiness can there possibly be for a martydharmya, a mortal being whose whole existence is based on temporary results?
And that realization leads directly to the idea of universal fear. Shloka 30 really drives this home. The power of time and karma is so absolute that fear of the Supreme Lord, or maybe fear because of the Supreme Lord's system, Madhvayam, extends to absolutely everyone, even the highest beings. We're talking the rulers of entire universes, the Lokapalanam, whose lives last for a kalpa, an unimaginable time frame. Even Lord Brahma himself, whose lifespan is 2 pararthas, a number so huge we can't even properly conceive of it. If beings living for billions and trillions of years are still subject to fear in the end, what hope does an ordinary person have of finding lasting peace through temporary actions?
So if success leads to failure, and even the gods are afraid of time, what's the actual engine driving all this constant change, this rise and fall? What creates this nonstop cycle of anxiety and flux?
It's the material modes of nature, the guhas. Shloka 31 states it very plainly. The modes goodness, passion, ignorance, they produce actions, kamak. And one mode triggers other modes. It's a constant, cyclical, interconnected dance. The living entity, the jiva, because it's associated with these modes, simply experiences the results, karma phalani, good or bad, generated by those actions.
That sounds incredibly deterministic.
Yeah.
Like the soul is just passively experiencing whatever these shifting modes throw at it. How do the modes actually create our experience?
Shlokas 32 and 33 explain that. The modes aren't static, they're always in flux, interacting. As long as there's a guvam yam inequality and balance among the modes, the soul perceives nanatvam. Variety, difference, this core belief that the world is inherently diverse, made of separate, lasting things, that's the first step towards suffering.
And believing in that difference leads to dependence.
Directly. Believing in nanatvam, difference, leads straight to paratantriya, dependence. If I think my happiness depends on getting this thing or keeping that relationship or achieving that status, all of which are temporary and outside of me, I become dependent on those external factors. And that dependence is what causes the fear of the Supreme Lord, Yujvarato Bayam. Because time, the Lord's agent, can sweep those external props away instantly. So people who accept this material variety as the ultimate truth, they are bewildered, mudyanti, constantly caught up in sorrow and grief. Shusarpita.
It's fascinating how the sources link that philosophical point to how people try to define reality differently. Because of this constant churning of the modes, Shloka 34 says that conditioned souls end up describing the Supreme Lord in all sorts of ways.
Yes. They try to label the ultimate transcendental reality based on the limited material effects they see through the filter of the modes. So they might call the supreme time, kala, because time seems to rule everything they experience. Or the self, atmagama, meaning the individual soul. Or the Vedas, agama. Or the universe itself, loka. Or inherent nature, svabhava. Or just religious duty, dharma. They're trying to cram the absolute into these conditioned, temporary boxes generated by the modes. And that inevitably leads to confusion and conflicting beliefs.
Okay, so after getting this incredibly detailed breakdown, action, consequences, illusion, the modes, the disciple, Uddhava, steps up. And he doesn't just say, thanks, got it. He voices the deepest, most fundamental confusion that I think anyone seriously grappling with this stuff will hit. This is where it all comes to a head.
Uddhava's questions aren't just intellectual exercises, they're deeply existential. He's heard it all, soul is fire, body is wood, modes create illusion, but he's struggling. He's trying to square the philosophical explanation with what he actually feels, what he experiences.
He puts his finger right on the core dilemma in Shloka 35. He asks, look, if the embodied soul, the dehi, is in the modes and the body's products, but it's also anapavata, not actually covered by them, then how come it's not bound? Or, flip side, how does it get bound?
You see the tension, it's acute. The teaching has established the soul is inherently pure, like fire separate from wood, it's uncovered. But the lived reality for most beings is profound bondage, profound suffering. So Uddhava is basically asking, if the ultimate truth is that I'm free and uncovered, why do I feel so completely trapped right now? He's pointing right at that gap between the soul's intrinsic nature and its current perceived experiential state.
Yeah, he needs a practical bridge. The philosophy is clear, but how does it translate? And true to form, Uddhava immediately asks for the practical application. He's voicing what every learner wants. Okay, what does freedom look like in the real world? That's Shloka 36.
He wants the blueprint for living free. How does the liberated person act, Forteta? How do they move around, Viharet? What are the signs, the characteristics, look and see, by which we can recognize them? He even asks the everyday stuff. What should they eat? What should they give up? How do they sit, sleep, walk? He wants to know the tangible, observable difference between someone bound and someone free.
And this all builds to the final massive question in Shloka 37, the ultimate philosophical knot. Uddhava states his confusion, his Brahma, straight up. This single living entity, Eka Eve, is described in the teachings as being both things simultaneously. Nitya Mukta, eternally liberated, and Iditabatha, eternally bound.
Right. The idea that the very same entity is at the same time eternally free and eternally conditioned, that's the paradox the whole teaching has to resolve. If bondage was just temporary, it would be easy, just a matter of time until freedom. But if the soul is eternally free, and yet also eternally bound, how can it be one thing?
That contradiction strongly suggests that maybe bondage and liberation aren't two different objective states of being, but maybe two different ways of perceiving the single underlying state of being.
That's pointing towards the critical realization, yes. The soul's fundamental nature never changes. It's eternally uncovered, and apavita, making it nityamukta in essence. But the moment that pure consciousness focuses on the illusion of duality, accepts that dependence, paratantra, generated by the modes, it acts and feels like a bound entity, which makes it nityabadha in experience. The external setup of the material world allows for both possibilities constantly. It's the awareness, the buddhi, the focus, that flips the switch between experiencing one or the other.
So the world is designed so the soul is always inherently free, but also always free to choose the experience of bondage through misidentification, or choose freedom through knowledge. The potential for bondage is eternal, but the actual experience depends on choice or awareness.
That's a very good way to put it, yes. This final deep confusion from Uddhava demands an answer that reconciles the absolute philosophical truth, eternal freedom, with the felt existential reality of seemingly eternal conditioning. #6, outro. So we've traced this whole system, haven't we? From the need for prescribed duty, svadharma, all the way to seeing why even heavenly rewards are ultimately fleeting. The core message, really, is that even the best karma, the best actions aimed at reward, they just keep you in a cycle governed by time, by fear, and by the eventual running out of your good credit, your pukya, real, lasting freedom. It demands that radical internal shift attachment and that persistent philosophical inquiry, jujunzaya.
Okay, let's try to boil this down as a final takeaway for you. These sources are really pushing for a fundamental shift in focus. We need to worry infinitely less about what we're doing, the external actions, the rituals, the striving, and put almost all the focus on why we're doing it, the internal motivation. Or, more accurately, the lack of selfish motivation, being akama atma. Because if you're constantly chasing that illusion of variety and difference, nanatvam, created by the modes, you're going to stay dependent, partanthya, and you're going to stay afraid.
And that path of knowledge, that jijasa, is presented as the only thing that actually burns away the modes and the illusion they create. It makes all those external rules for temporary rewards kind of beside the point.
Which leaves us with that profound paradox Uddhava brought up. It's the real head-scratcher to leave you with. If the very same soul is somehow simultaneously eternally free, itimutta, and eternally bound, vitipaha, then what subtle shift in your perception, right here, right now, is determining which of those states you are actually experiencing? Is bondage some fixed external reality imposed by fate and time, or is it maybe just a habitual way of seeing? A fear-driven perspective, looking through the discording lens of the material modes, a habit that maybe, just maybe, knowledge can break in an instant.